What I'm going to talk about right now are the five main changes that occur in adolescent thinking. What I mean by this is that this is looking at study after study after study, so not just one specific study, and looking at all of those studies cumulatively to see what are the biggest changes that occur in adolescent thinking. Again, between the ages of, let's say, the age of 10 to early 20s. So this is a summary of all of this research that's been going on for decades. And I mean, we're really talking about hundreds and hundreds of different studies. The first big change that happens, again, according to research, is that during adolescence, we are better able to think about things abstractly. If you recall your reading about Piaget, we're going to talk about Piaget in just a little bit. This also coincides with some of his ideas, but the idea that during the formal operational period, we're better able to think about things abstractly. This helps us understand these abstract concepts like friendship. In childhood, friends are, people that you're doing things with, but what does it really mean to be a good friend, or what can you expect out of a friendship? Other topics that are more abstract include things like faith, democracy, fairness, honesty, the meaning of life, just pondering these ideas. These aren't things that are concrete right in your face. They are, harder to put your finger on. But in adolescence, we can start to do that. This also helps adolescents understand our language. So using different puns, which I have some examples of on the next slide, proverbs, metaphors, analogies. Oftentimes children, when they hear parents using different metaphors or analogies, take them literally and have a hard time understanding them. But in adolescence, when we can think about things more abstractly, these become easier to tackle. And again, I give some examples of puns on the next slide. The second big main change, again, according to lots and lots of different research, is that adolescents are better able to think about what's possible instead of just what's real. What does this allow them to do? This allows them to think differently about the future. So instead of just being like, here's what's given, they can go in all sorts of different directions to think about what they could do, who they could date, who they could become, in a way that they weren't able to do in childhood, at least not based in reality. This also allows them to generate alternate possibilities and explanations more systematically. So, thinking about if I go to this college, what will this allow me to do? If I end up dating this person, what are people going to think about that? What do I think about that? What do my parents think about that? Actually going through all of the people that matter. Again, what's possible instead of just what's real. I can think about all these different alternatives. Underlying all of this is that they are engaging in hypothetical thinking. So this idea of if-then thinking. If I do this, then what happens? If I decide to join soccer, then perhaps I can't work an after-school job. If I join soccer, then this means that perhaps I'm hanging out with my significant other less. So it really is about being able to think on a deeper level, what is possible and what are my options. All of this has implications for social behavior. And what I mean by this is that if we're able to engage in what's possible instead of what's real, that helps us to imagine what other people might be thinking or what their perspectives might be. So, for example, if I am able to think about what's possible, that's not what's real. And if I'm thinking about somebody else's mind, it's not, I can't actually know what they're thinking. So I'm thinking about what they possibly are thinking. This is going to be really beneficial for our relationships broadly, whether that's with friends or romantic partners or our parents or siblings, to be able to think about, just alternate possibilities, what they might be thinking, what they might be going through, what their perspectives may be. That second part, choosing alternatives, this is important for social behavior too, because I'm actually thinking through different options, whatever they may be, not just in social behavior, but it can affect positively or also negatively, depending on the situation. Um, again, like, do I want to hang out with my friends right now? What is this going to look like? If I do this, then what happens? If I choose to go to the party instead of doing my homework or instead of studying for the exam, what is that going to mean for me broadly as a student? What is it going to mean for me in terms of my social behavior? All of these are really important decisions that are taking place day in and day out in an adolescent's life, and obviously beyond an adolescent's life. But this is when these changes first start to take place. The third main change that takes place is that adolescents really begin to think about thinking. This is called metacognition. When we're specifically thinking about our own emotions, how do I feel? What's going on? This is called introspection, but they're related processes. So metacognition is just the broader umbrella term. Uh, if you can recall back to being in high school, perhaps maybe even, let's say, 15 years old, this is when we're more likely to be sitting in our beds just thinking about, whatever happened in your day. How are you feeling? It's not that children don't engage in this at all, but adolescents are doing it to a greater degree. And it's not necessarily all problematic. It's really great to be in touch with your own emotions and to know how you're thinking and to know how you're feeling. These can be really great strengths. We need these in our day-to-day lives. We need these in our relationships or these skills. But there are problems with metacognition. And the problems stem when it becomes, I don't know, too overwhelming or we're doing it too much. So some of the problems include the formation of an imaginary audience. What an imaginary audience is this idea that everybody is looking at you. So if you see in this picture right here, it looks like all of those people are staring at you or in your direction. I remember when I was in 6th grade and I was on the basketball team and my family was low income. And so when everybody on the team decided to get matching Nike high top basketball shoes, and I really wanted them too, but my family couldn't afford them. My family made some sacrifices in order to get me these black high top shoes that were from Payless. So they were just, knockoff versions. And I just remember thinking at that time, oh my God, Mom, everybody is going to be looking at me. They're going to be noticing my shoes. They're staring at me. I'm the center of everyone's world. In reality, were some people probably judging me on my shoes? Sure. But was it as big of a deal as I thought it was? I mean, probably not. We also could think about imaginary audience for these times when you get a pimple, especially in these adolescent periods. Oh my gosh, everybody's going to be staring at my pimple. Everybody's going to be noticing me. So really, I'm caught up in my own thinking that like, oh my God, I am the center of everyone's world. A personal fable is also a problem with metacognition. And there are two parts to a personal fable. The first part is that this idea that I am unique. And based on that, the second part is that therefore bad things won't happen to me. So, for example, if because I'm so unique, it might be the situation where my mom or dad doesn't understand me when I have a breakup. Mom, Dad, you just don't understand. You can't possibly understand what I'm going through that this boy broke up with me. This is my personal fable. Like you just can't possibly understand because I'm so unique. So that's the first part of a personal fable. The second part is how it affects our behavior. So, think about something stupid that you did in adolescence that, you could have gotten really hurt or in trouble for, but you're like, bad things won't happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. Going back to that CDC data, All right, wearing a seatbelt. If I don't wear a seatbelt, I'll be fine. Like, this person's not going to crash. If I ride with a drunk driver, we'll be fine. We'll get home. It won't happen to me. If I have unprotected sex, then, I'm not going to get pregnant or impregnate someone or get an STD, right? It won't happen to me. I'm so caught up in myself that I'm not thinking broadly. I'm not thinking statistically, certainly. And so, this won't happen to me. This is based in problems with metacognition. Now, for that third point, we live in a social world, so certainly it is the case, as I mentioned with the imaginary audience, that there are times where people are looking at you and are paying attention to you. When we get to talk more about peers and adolescence, we'll really see how, our peers are judging us or our peers are affecting us. So yes, indeed, during this time period, people may be paying attention to us in different ways. And also we have more peer pressure. So going along with the personal fable, the idea that, like if I engage in these behaviors, it won't happen to me, but I also have these pressures of peers around me telling me to do things that maybe aren't the safest. The fourth point there, adults, with a question mark, is I'm pointing that at you. Do you think that issues with an imaginary audience or a personal fable are just experienced by adolescents? Or are they also experienced by adults too? I hope you can think of examples of adults, and I'm not necessarily saying this is a good thing, but examples of adults who also are really concerned about what other people think or are, worried about going out in public if they, aren't dressed a certain way because what will people think? So those are evident, that's evidence for an imaginary audience. I know myself, like I have as a ginger and having blonde eyelashes, if I leave the house and I'm not wearing mascara, I'm not saying this is only for myself, not judging anybody else and their appearance, but I feel weird. I feel like people are looking at me, right? So this is an imaginary audience, though. In reality, nobody cares. Or if they do, it doesn't matter, right? But this is something that's my own imaginary audience. Similarly, a personal fable occurs all the time in adulthood too. So do drunk drivers drive? Yes, because they won't happen to them. Are adults still having unprotected sex? Yes, they do, right? Lots of evidence for that. So it certainly isn't the case that only adolescents are having these problems with metacognition. It's just that these problems are heightened during adolescence, and this is when they're first really starting. You can definitely have a child who's also doing these things too, but again, it's adolescence where these are really coming online. So I just want to make that super clear that it's not only adolescents that are having these issues. These still occur in adulthood, but they're just heightened in adolescence. And this is when they're first happening. So we really notice the difference and shift from childhood to adolescence.